Jai Shri Krishna, Namaste, and welcome to Chitty Media's Current Affairs Show. Today I'll be joined by not one but two very esteemed guests that are very knowledgeable in the subject matter that we're going to be discussing tonight. Tonight we're going to be picking apart a little bit more about fake news, the trend that's happening, more so with Leicester recently, and how it's been happening in Pakistan, in India, in the UK too. And we'll be looking at just a handful of cases to get started into depth, but there are so many other cases we could have picked, but we've picked a few to get started. So I'd like to firstly warmly welcome Pandit Satish Sharma ji. You all know he's our fantastic Hindu leader here in the UK, and he's got to the bottom of many things that we've had issues here with as a Hindu community. So thank you for joining us, Pandit ji.
Om Pranam Jai Shri Ram.
Jai Shri Krishna. And I would also like to warmly welcome Pakistani-born barrister and theologian Khalid Umar ji. Khalid ji has kindly taken some time out for this important discussion tonight from his very busy schedule. He's actually traveling at the moment. So very warm welcome to you, Khalid ji. Thank you so much for joining us.
Thank you. Pranam.
Pranam. So today, I'll start with Panditji actually. Panditji, could you give us the latest with what's happening in Leicester at the moment? Because that will give us a bit of background about the trend that's been happening with the fake news propaganda.
Wonderful place to start. So I've been speaking again to a few of our friends and family connections in Leicester, and a couple of things I can report which are consistent. Firstly, there has been no further violence. There doesn't appear to have been any other incidents. The members of the Hindu community are continuing to be tranquil and reserved and following the instructions from the police. And so hopefully we're seeing this settle down. The second thing that I can also share is that as the police investigations continue, information is coming out, and the information that's coming out really is indicative of what I think is a very disturbing trend. And we can explore that as we talk about the specific instances. The one bit of breaking news is that there was a report a while ago, and it was tweeted by a number of very prominent Muslim activists in Leicester, and it was published on, I think, the Five Pillars newspaper. And it alleged that some Hindu lads had jumped out of a car and attempted to kidnap a young girl from outside of a school. And obviously that's an incendiary piece of information for something so sensitive. Any mainstream publication or journalist or reporter would have explored the evidence. And the police have been emphasizing, please don't make any reports without having substantiated the evidence. Now that the investigation has been conducted, the police have issued a statement today. The crux of that statement is that this incident did not happen. Okay, so they've interviewed the young lady, they've interviewed the school, and had a look at CCTV footage and everything else. And the report from the Assistant Commissioner, I think it is, in Leicester, Rob Nixon, is that this incident never took place. Now that's an extraordinary development. You know, it wasn't as though there was a misunderstanding. It wasn't as though there was an attempted assault or a molestation. The incident just didn't take place at all. And that could have been very easily established. Yes. Now, it gets even worse because the people who actually proliferated this on social media have also tweeted that they too have, after the event, conducted their own investigations. They visited the location, tried to contact the family, etc., etc., etc. And so there's no evidence at all. And then it's quite strange that at the end of their social media tweets, they would then say how terrible it is to make these things up and that one shouldn't engage in false allegations, which is, let's say, it's like closing the stable door after the horse has bolted when you're the person who opened the door and released the horse in the first place. Yes. And so there is a very serious issue there. That's not the only... please.
I was just going to ask Khalidji, with his legal experience, surely that would be a waste of police time, these false allegations. Is that something that the police could then press charges against?
Yeah, I mean, raising false allegation is a very serious crime, and if somebody after the police investigation is found to have leveled false charges, then surely you first of all you can write to the police that, well, are they ready to prosecute the person, and if not, then a private prosecution can be brought about under such circumstances. This is really, really serious.
Well, I
But let me say, this is not a solitary incident, and it is not happening for the first time. I'm reminded of an similar incident in January, I think 2018, in Canada. There was there was a like 11-year-old girl in Toronto who said that a stranger has cut off her hijab with scissors while she was on way to school. And the school administration called police. They sent an alert on social media. Local media rushed to the school, and there were press conferences. And the girl described the incident in front of a sea of cameras. By afternoon, there was an international. It was an international news story. Even the prominent politicians across Canada rushed to condemn the incident as an act of hate. And even the prime minister said that Canada is an open society, and incidents like this cannot be tolerated, blah blah blah. And a few days later, the whole thing crumbled. Police released a statement saying that investigation has revealed that the attack did not happen, and the nothing happened. The girl, the family of the girl just issued a sorry statement, and that's it. So this is something. This is a very kind of, I would say, a trend. It's not something that only to happen in Leicester. This is something to. This is something which they play victim card, and unfortunately, Muslims in the West are very or wherever they are in minority, they are very I would say very much prone, or very much into playing this victim card. Sad, but that's how it is.
Yes.
It's just on that note. It's a worry because obviously there are crimes that do occur, and the last thing you want is for the police not to have been able to attend because they're engaged in a wild goose chase, and
Yeah.
that it also undermines the credibility of the people who are making these reports. There are real casualties in this incident. This has established that, in fact, there were no Hindutva thugs who were actually trying to molest a Muslim underage, a minor. That there was no RSS fascism or anything, and all of those things that had been thrown into the air as a result of this. None of it was true. But there are very real casualties. There were 100 families who were effectively under curfew in their homes, who had their doors kicked in and damaged, and there is physical damage to property as well. There was that poor young man whose photograph was deliberately circulated on social media with a photograph of his vehicle with the registration number, and it turned out that he wasn't even in the country. Just imagine if that poor young man had been in the country.
Yes.
And his parents suffered the harassment of a mob turning up outside their door demanding satisfaction and to see who this terrible person was. These are very, very real incidents. And I must say that we've just had not so long ago, a case where a British veteran who made a post on Facebook, which was deemed to be offensive by some people, the police arrived at his doorstep and arrested him. And here we are speaking of a totally different order of magnitude of criminality. And so it's, let's see what the police do, because if they don't apply the same scale of response and the same level of concern across all communities, then that's active discrimination. That is a denial of the right to be seen equally in front of the law. And that's a very, very serious issue.
Yes, absolutely. Absolutely. So, I mean, we're having this issue, as Khalid G said, this is becoming a trend because it seems to be more of a trend. So for some reason, since 2014, because in 2015, there was a case where, going back to India now, so we've had Canada, we've had the UK. In India, there was a case where a nun, an elderly nun, had been gang raped, and all the press were very quick to say it was 6 Hindu men.
Oh yes, that was a terrible case.
Yes, but Kolkata Supreme Court later, 2 years later, had found it was 6 Bangladeshi Muslim men, but the press were completely muted on that fact. What do you think is behind this anti-Hindu, Hindu-phobic? It's propagandists masquerading as journalists, putting the press out there. People don't do their due diligence. They'll just read the headline and think all Hindus are doing these terrible atrocity, heinous crimes. Can you give us some more insight into this?
You know, the issue of misinformation and weaponizing propaganda, Goebbels has created a toolbook. Goebbels at that time, he said, one of the rules he'd said was, accuse the other of the act you wish to perpetrate. All right? And so that's a standard sort of known way of doing things. And if you have a look in this particular case in Leicester, on the one hand, none of the instances that were thrown and the Hindu community were accused of inflicting on the local Muslim community, not one of them has withstood scrutiny. And yet, on the other hand, there have been disturbance of the peace, damage to property, all sorts of harm to reputation, all of those things. And so there is that Goebbelsian sort of strategy seems to be playing out. And I call it a strategy because this is not an isolated incident. One of the last things that I'm really disappointed about is that the local Hindu leaders have been quite engaged with the police and very tightly following instructions and coordinating everything at the highest levels. But there is silence from the leaders of the Muslim community locally. And, you know, it would be wonderful if they were to come out and, in the interests of harmony and community cohesion, actually instruct their own community in the same way that the Hindu leaders instructed the young Hindu men, that this is unacceptable, that this is going to harm all of everybody's lives and everybody's prospects. You know, we've just had the ridiculous situation where lack of security in Punjab has meant that BMW announced that they're not going to invest in Punjab. And, you know, we don't want things to get to the situation where people are saying, well, let's avoid this place. This is not a good place where people can bring up children, invest in businesses. So there are very serious issues. And I think all the community representatives could perhaps engage a little bit more fully with this situation. If I can share a little bit more information about Leicester, I've just had a message pop up. We have a wonderful local organization there called British Hindu Voice, and they have been engaged in supporting the families and literally day and night being in touch with the highest levels of the police authorities there. And they've sent me some more information. And the information that I've just received is that in addition to this allegation with regard to this young lady who never existed, the kidnapped victim who was a mystery, in addition to that, a video has been circulated purporting to show the sacred scriptures being desecrated in Belgrave Road. And further assessment of that seems to have concluded that that too is a completely fake video and that the incident never happened.
So it's fabricated.
So that too seems to be fabricated at this moment in time. I'm hoping to get independent confirmation of that, but that does seem to be fairly robust and evidenced reporting for us.
So unless the law actually takes something into their hands now to stop all of the time wasting of this can continuously persist. When will it stop? What will make it stop? And who could make it stop?
Well, I think this is the challenge for the police. And, you know, we have to remind the police that they're not social workers, that they are not there to maintain peace as their raison d'etre. That's not the reason for which they exist. They are there to gather evidence of crimes and then, having gathered the evidence, to present it in a court of law. They are actually there to ensure justice, because if there is no justice, then nothing else can exist. Justice is the most fundamental of human rights. And what I'm hoping is that the police are aware of this, because unless they act on that basis and they don't put comfort, safety and security as being higher priorities than justice, then we will see a continuation of this. They do need to draw a line in the sand, ensure that there are consequences for those who have maliciously sought to incite hatred and fan these flames. And only then, I think, will people think twice before doing things such as proliferating the completely fake information that this young girl had been molested and an attempted kidnapping had happened. We are so fortunate that nothing worse happened as a consequence of that malicious tweet. So the police, in the hands of the police, and I'm sure that our friends at British Hindu Voice, who are, as I say, fully engaged with the police, will also be monitoring the manner in which the police continue to process this after the investigations have been completed.
Yes, that tweet actually went viral, and upon examination of it, it actually fails at the very first hurdle, because the tweet says 3 Indian men went up to a girl and asked if she was Muslim, and when she said yes, they tried to kidnap her. That's what the tweet says. Now, in Leicester, there are so many hijabi girls, you don't have to ask if they're Muslim. If they wanted to grab a girl, they would have grabbed a girl. I saw these in the comments. I thought, actually, yes, that's right. So at first scrutiny, the tweet itself it's a failure.
And how do they know they were Indian? We have so many people who are Asian, and you know that famous word Asian? We have so many people who are Asian that you can't identify. But yet some of these tweets, I've been following them as well. It strikes me as a mystery. How do they manage to determine the political ideology and then claim that, oh yes, these are Hindutva thugs? How do they manage to understand their charitable associations and then say, oh yes, they're associated with the RSS and Seva organizations? So it is a deliberate ploy. And it's one which I think really does need to be responded to. And hopefully this will be the opportunity for it to be responded to adequately.
Yes, actually, it just reminds me of a case that was earlier this year in India of 2 brothers that were desecrating a Muslim shrine. And the 2 brothers were wearing saffron.
Yes.
Appearing to be Hindu, but it turned out that Kamal and Nadim weren't Hindu, and they were there again to stir up and defame Hindus. This is
maybe they were Hindutva, the RSS members as well. Who knows? I say from a name you can't tell. So there is a lot of work to be done here, and I hope everybody who's acting with such malice is aware that the consequences of actions like this very rarely avoid the perpetrators as well. Sooner or later, the consequences come back to a person, and sometimes the consequences can be more tragic than the mischief that was originally instigated. So it's time for wise people to intervene and bring this to a conclusion for all of our sakes. Before we get a terrible incident, there are so many of these incidents. The case of Asia Bibi, the Christian woman in Pakistan, and allegations had been made that she'd been also involved in blasphemy and desecration. And yet it turned out afterwards it was nothing except a petty argument between a group of disgruntled associates. And yet the consequences for her were terrible. So we really do need to have wise heads engaging in this. Khalidji.
It took 10 years for Asia Bibi to be released, and during the one governor of Punjab got assassinated as well, because he favored he uttered some statement which were found to be favorable, to that lady. So the thing is, I think in this country, the racial discrimination laws have gone too far, and the police is really scared on upon the allegations of a racial discrimination. So and the Muslims are very expert in getting advantage. It's not only, I mean, I have seen instances happening in workplaces, in hospitals, and other places where they would instead, if a doctor, or for example anyone is charged or alleged to have committed any professional negligence, they would immediately come up with an allegation of racial discrimination on the management, and then the management has to actually not only pay fines and be on the back foot. So this is something very serious, and
Mm.
please will not, because um, the thing is that the Muslim diaspora is very much united when it comes to any leveling any charges, or defending any charges, other than the other people. So I mean, if we see, looking at the Leicester thing, I believe that it was all sparked after the T20 match result, where India won. Am I right, Pandaji?
Khalidji,
There was.
this is another dimension to the misinformation storm. You see,
Okay.
there was a time gap between the cricket match and the instances which suddenly escalated the whole issue. The
Right.
allegations that were made about the cricket match didn't involve a Pakistani Muslim person at all. There were a group of Indian origin fans who were supporting India, engaging with people who were supporting the other side. There was one
Yeah.
gentleman who afterward turned out to be a Sikh. And
Okay.
so it may have had some sort of issues to do with Pakistan. It may have had issues to do with Punjab. There's a whole different web, shall we say, of identitarian elements in that whole mix. But what isn't there is Muslim. And
Hmm.
so that allegation was suddenly escalated after the events which actually then occurred subsequently.
Hmm.
We had not heard that this was this is not the catalyst. The event of the cricket match was not a catalyst, but it was immediately trotted out as having been the catalyst. It's almost as though um, the key event was the attack on the Ganesh Puja by those 5 Muslim boys who attacked the puja with eggs. And
Okay.
that was the original catalyst for this whole sequence of events. And then the link was made to the cricket match, etc., which at the time struck me as a little bit odd, and further investigation confirmed that it was actually not connected. And it's a very tenuous and fragile sort of link to have made anyway. But the allegations didn't bear scrutiny. And so what we do have is a very tight set of sequential events, one leading to the other, and then in parallel with them, a set of tweets, a set of news releases and articles, which run in parallel but bear no resemblance to the actual sequence of events as they occurred. So it's a clear case of a disinformation campaign attempting to, as far as I can tell, one, conceal and justify the original catalyst for the troubles, and two, to try and mollify any consequential action. But Khalid, you just made one point which I'd like to pick up on. This
Yeah.
issue of racial discrimination. You see, the law and the Equality Act is very clear. It says that the law cannot give priority to one group over. Jurisprudence is blindfolded so that she doesn't see the identity of the person. Now, there was the Telford report was released only the week before last, and that clearly established a racial and religious dimension in the crimes that were inflicted. Are the police not worried about being accused of racial discrimination against the young girls themselves? I fail to
True.
understand. I fail to understand how they could not see that actually they themselves were discriminating in a manner which is completely unfair and unjust, and it makes a mockery of the notion of a person being, of all of us being equally innocent in front of the law.
That's a
Yeah.
very
As I
good
said,
point.
the thing is that uh, the Muslims are very much expert in playing the victim card.
Mm.
So this is something you need to keep it in mind, that if something happens or doesn't happen, but the way it is projected through the media, social media, and then the left liberal media comes in sport, and then it's not only limited to India. It is a worldwide phenomenon. We all know it. We all witnessing it. So things are escalated to a certain level. As I said, that In 2018, Trudeau came to the screen to say that the Canada, we are not going to tolerate such and such happenings. And after 3 days, it was found that it was all a made up story.
Mm,
So
extraordinary.
this is happening time and again. It's and whatever happened um, in Leicester. Tomorrow it would be repeated in Birmingham. The day after in Manchester. So this is a recurring
Mm.
uh, similarity in actions, uh, with different
Well,
names and
I
different
think that would
places.
be dependent. I think that would be dependent upon the police authority then, and I think responsibility, if it happens elsewhere, will also lie with the police authority. A part of their role is to have a deterrent effect as well. You know, we're a nation who are policed by consent, and we don't want to get to the situation where the general population have to consider, well, do we need to review our relationship with policing by consent when perhaps there are groups who have refused to be policed by consent? They need to be policed by some other means. And the last thing I'd just like to say before we wrap up, because I'm conscious that you have an urgent engagement, you've mentioned Trudeau a couple of times. The last thing that has struck me as being very strange is that
Yeah,
we have had no contribution from the parliamentarians in Leicester. You know, we have Claudia Webb, who has made countless tweets about issues to do with human rights abuses in that tiny little bit of land, which is probably it's probably no larger than Evington in Leicester. The Kashmir Valley is a tiny little piece of geographical land, and she's very
yeah.
concerned about what happens there. And yet, on her own doorstep, she is the representative for that area. She has been completely, what's the term? AWOL, absent without leave. Not just her, but the councillors. Where are the councillors who are supposedly the pillars of our community, weaving the fabric of friendship and harmony together? Again, pin drop silence. We have had hardly any noise at all from the champions of community cohesion, the government departments, ministers. Everything is completely muted, which struck me as being very, very strange, deafening in silence.
And Panditji, I mean, strangely, this is we are talking about Leicester, which is a city in the UK with I think 28% of the Hindu population, which is the
Correct.
maximum in any city.
Yes.
So Hindus are the largest non-ethnic majority, I would say. If it can happen in Leicester with a majority where the majority of the non-whites is a non-British white is a Hindus,
Mm, mm.
what would happen in areas which are where, like in the Greater Manchester area and Birmingham and other places, you can well imagine.
Well,
Um,
the powers of be have to take all these factors into account. They're, as I say, they're way above my pay grade, but I'm confident they're taking note of these issues. You mentioned the percentage in Leicester, and
yeah.
I'm also painfully aware that we in Leicester contribute a huge amount of revenue to the exchequer, and
Oh, really?
the last statistics that came out for prison representation showed 0.0% of Hindus in prison, and the per capita figures haven't changed for the Hindu community, which is not
Yeah.
the same, sadly, with other communities. So either the authorities understand they have a responsibility to support their partners in community building, community cohesion, and a prosperity for all of us, or they have a choice of abandoning. And let's see what they finally decide to do. The community is quite shall we say, engaged, dynamic, and is capable of trying to strategize and work out what its own response will be. But I really hope that the authorities assume the responsibility that they have supposedly been granted and exercise it to ensure peace and tranquility for all of us, from all communities.
Yes,
One thing,
Panditji, one.
Panditji, I would like to, sorry, I would
Sorry,
like
yes.
Sorry.
to ask you is, I mean, what do you think? I mean, if I would say that Muslims get some kind of a favor, I would say soft kind of favor, being belonging to the so-called Abrahamic religions. And when it comes to the Christian world, Muslims got some kind of a favor. I mean, I'm because Christianity, Judaism, and Islam has got the same kind of
Yeah.
same ancestors,
Same
Abraham,
thing.
Mm.
and so there is a lot of things in common in between these three religions. A lot is common in theology and as well as in history and being belonging to the same, and they are all against the polytheism as well. And considering Hindus are considered as a polytheists, so this is also something we need to think
Wow.
about.
Well, this is a wonderful topic for a much longer conversation.
Yeah,
But the initial thoughts that pop into my mind, it's when we look at the, shall we say, the ethos and the principles of the religions, I always look at the outcome. The Bible tells us that a good tree cannot bear bad fruit, and a bad tree cannot bear good fruit, and a person is known by their actions. And I think all of those are applicable to try and understand these traditions. Without a doubt, the Abrahamic traditions understand each other very well. They understand how to negotiate with each other, to
yeah,
integrate with each other, and they have managed to draw boundaries.
yeah,
The difficulty is that they do not understand the vision of the First Nations which preceded the Abrahamic ascendancy. And there's a lot of work to be done there. But I'm fairly sure that now that we have large numbers of people from our Eastern theological sort of traditions being able to speak in the concept set of the Abrahamic traditions, there is actually the opportunity and the possibility of very fertile exchanges. But it's a recent development that we have gotten to this stage, and the possibility is very, very attractive. Um, the only aspect which is perhaps there's a question mark over is the power imbalance, because many of the principles upon which the Abrahamic traditions have built their castles are dependent upon securing and holding power, whereas the original First Nations were never overly fixated on holding power. They're very much more about the ascension of a human being, the evolution of this incredible being that's been created to fully realize who we are, what we are, and why we're here. It's a totally different ethos set. It's a totally different perspective on existence. So there is a natural affinity between the Abrahamic traditions, but I think there is a long way they have to go before they come to find peace in their own hearts. It's eluded them so far. Maybe that's something that we have to share with them, given the appropriate time, freedom, and space.
and the supremacist ideologies don't actually need any peace in heart because they always believe in life in the hereafter, and it is all about conquering lands and conquering by whatever means. It is about the numerical advantage. So it
Well,
is
I
something.
have a, I have a, I have a unshakable confidence that the wisdom which created such an incredible world, which is filled with so much beauty, that wisdom which over 3 or 4 millennia created such a diversity of people, and there are none of us who even look alike. That wisdom has also left within this existence everything we need to be able to help some people who are perhaps confused at this moment, whose religious journey has not yet matured. I think we have every opportunity to be able to turn this around. I think we can do this.
You're both so full of wisdom. I could sit here listening to you all day, but we've
Oh, dear.
slightly veered off topic ever so
Oh, I'm
slightly.
so sorry.
No,
We're
not,
exploring. We're
not,
exploring a solution, Solange. We're
I
exploring a
loved
solution.
it,
But
and I'm sure
thank
our
you, thank
audience will
you.
too. Honestly, you're both, I could listen to you all day, but I just have one final case to talk before we wrap it up. Last year, the whole globe heard about how a Muslim boy in India tried to, well, he entered a temple complex to drink some water. And the whole headlines were, this poor little Muslim boy, he was bashed and beaten for drinking water in a Hindu temple. Can you give us some clarification? Because again, the headlines showed bias against Hindus. So the final question, and then we can wrap this up.
Well, you're absolutely right. I think it's just yet another example of the toolkit which Khalidji referred to. There's a strategy at play here, and the strategy seems to be ignite a conflict, create some confusion, and then follow the strategy which I mentioned earlier, which is to tarnish and denigrate the opposition. You see, it's a very simple, basic way of functioning. It's not complicated, and we needn't overcomplicate it. You know, you see this happening in schoolyards, where perhaps one child has bullied another child and then says, oh, no, actually, miss, he did it first. Right? It's nothing more complicated than that process. The consequences, however, are significantly more serious, and we need to make sure that the authorities are really acting. They know what's going on. As Khalidji has said, this is not a decision that's being made on lack of evidence. It's not a decision which is being made on the Crown Prosecution Service saying, no, this can't be taken through to prosecution. This is a decision that's being made on the basis of social sciences, principles and factors. And that's the problem. And I think with every one of these instances, it brings us closer to that place where it becomes intolerable and unacceptable for the police not to act. The confidence of the public in the police is the only thing which maintains law and order in a society where policing by consent is conducted. And once that confidence is gone, then it's very, very hard to reverse. And frankly speaking, the police in this country does not have the resources to function in a manner other than policing by consent. So they really should work with us and with communities who are wholeheartedly committed to that principle to ensure that it survives.
Panditji, thank you so much for your input. And Khalidji, we're sorry to keep you longer than we expected, but your input was so valuable. And we look forward to speaking to you again very soon. Thank you so much to you both. Thank you.
It's been a pleasure, and bon voyage, Khalidji.
Thank you. Thank you.
Please remember to subscribe to us and switch on the notifications for this channel. For our other social media links, more content, and to support our work, please visit citti.net. Dhanyavad. Namaskar.